Welcome to Hope on Fire, relevant talk radio for young adults. Whether you're 25 or 45, there's bound to be a discussion that you care about. Our mission is to share practical ways to find God in your everyday life. Our host today is Sabine Vatel.
You've heard the cliches. Men don't cry. All they care about is sex and sports. They don't remember important anniversary dates. They come from Mars and refuse to ask for directions. A few years ago, a politician caused quite a stir when he used the term girly man. What is a manly man anyway? This lack of gender identity has had a profound effect in our society and our family systems. The myriad of stereotypes swirling about and seeming lack of role models make it challenging to define masculinity in the 21st century. Welcome to Hope on Fire. My name is Sabine Vatel, your host for this program entitled What's a Real Man? Our goal in this broadcast is to take an honest look at the main issues surrounding masculinity and raise the awareness of why the discussion matters. We may find out at the end of this that the definition of a real man may not be as elusive as the larger culture has led us to believe. And how appropriate that I have with me very special guests. I mean, who else would I have, really? But the two other hosts of Hope on Fire and the two manly men that I want you to meet today is Chris Lang. And very familiar with Chris Lang. Those of you who've heard our programs before. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Sabine. Great to be here.
Glad you're here, too.
It's always a challenge to talk about this topic.
Yeah.
Because you speak for all of the men of the world, and the pressure's on, Rick. So,
yes, you do. And then the other person I want you to meet is Rick Man, the real man in this whole panel. It's Rick Man.
There you go.
Cheesy,
that was very good.
It's okay.
Yeah. Okay, well, anyway,
He's probably heard that before.
It's just so irresistible. Anyway, going back into our conversation.
Well, I gotta tell you,
that was good.
It's got a lot of pressure because it's like, we're talking about masculinity in men, and here are two examples, sort of. I believe in you guys. I really do. And, I have a vested interest in this, and I know there's some ladies listening to us. And, our challenge is, the risk that some of the women have is to settle for someone that's less than a real man. And the lack of role models leads perhaps women to settle for someone that they probably shouldn't be with or who can't stand by their side. Still, the need of a role model is particularly crucial to you guys. And that leads me to ask you guys, in terms of who the influencers were for you. I mean, what did you find? How did you become a real man? Where did you learn that? One day I woke up and I started crying, and I was like, what is this? The bright lights, and I was a guy. I was born.
And that wasn't testosterone.
Yeah, who taught you? But really, we're kidding, but really, it has. I think it has to be passed on somehow.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about is, when we talk about growing into yourself as a guy, and you look around and you try to figure out, okay, well, why do I act the way that I do? Who has influenced? Now, obviously, a lot of it has to do plainly with the fact that you're just a guy and you got testosterone.
Sure.
But, my answer when it comes to the role models or the examples that I've had in my life isn't a typical one, because I didn't have a strong father figure around. In fact, when he was around, it really wasn't very strong at all. And so, raised by my grandmother, who, bless her heart, was a great role model when it comes to a loving grandmother and a mom and saying I love you a lot. But that's not... That doesn't take the place of a dad. Mm-hmm. So, what I've had to do is kind of fill in the gaps with maybe friends' fathers that I've had that I've admired.
Teachers.
Mm-hmm. And then, unfortunately, it's almost like you have to look at other male models, or male role models, I should say, in the media. And part of it might even, I'm influenced by, Jack Bauer on 24, this gung-ho guy who just,
really?
Who isn't?
I see a little resemblance.
Yeah, well, it's saying Tom Cruise, but no, so, unfortunately, I've had to kind of, put this together in a composite type example or role model and kind of pick and choose. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe I've had an advantage there, because I can take the best part from each and try to, incorporate that in my life, whether that's, a role model for dating, for being a husband, for being a father. There's a lot of that kind of plays into it.
I can so relate. I mean, as a woman, I can relate, coming from a broken family, having to create you use the word composite, a composite man. There's been a lot of heroes in my life, but there's also been some zeros who came through. Yeah. And again, the idea of how do you recognize the real thing when you see it. What about you,
Well, I think it's important for all of the men that are watching this program and women who have all come from broken homes. This program is intended to bring hope. Because you know, over 50% of the families out there are going through divorce or will be in the future, and so trying to find out how we can make sense of the brokenness in the home. I mean, 90% of all of the men in prisons come from broken homes, where they didn't have a role model to help mentor them into manhood.
You said 90%?
90% of the men in prison come from broken homes. And masculinity must be passed on from man to man. A mom, bless her heart, she can give a man qualities. She can give the man a lot of qualities that will be lifelong positives for his character. And yet she can't help him understand what it means to be a man.
And what's a mom to do?
I mean, when a young boy skins his knee, he runs to his mom for comfort. She's the El Shaddai part of God's character. Men aren't known for the nurturing part. So, you know, because the dad will say, you know, buck it up, kid, you'll be fine. But when it's time for adventure, you know, and the dad says, come on, Tiger, let's go play. You know, the kid's gonna, the little boy is gonna run after his dad for adventure. So these are naturally wired into the little boy's heart, and every culture has a rite of passage for manhood. And in our country and in the Western cultures, a lot of that has quickly been disappearing. In fact,
it's eroded. Really,
that's
frankly.
right.
And what is left as far as examples for us?
I mean, new fads come up in blazing pace, destroying tradition. And men are more and more confused because traditions are being eroded by new fads that are coming out.
Right. And you mentioned new fads, and immediately my mind goes through TV.
Well, yeah, I mean, we talk about society in general. You know, when we talk about the model man. I mean, back in the '50s, it was John Wayne. I mean, here's this guy who bigger than life, broad shoulders, comes riding on a horse, saves the day, strong, a rock. And now in society or in TV, what do we have? We have Chandler. We have Ross. We have Joey on
what
Friends.
a contrast! You know, the strong type versus those who watch Friends, the neurotic sort of falling apart man.
Right. or the other extreme, you do have like the macho spy guy who is, you know, he's womanizing and doesn't care what happens and throws responsibility aside sometimes when just, you know, to get the job done. And so unfortunately, you know, you have the extremes.
That's right, and that's a good point, Rick. You know, men seem to be drawn to other men who are willing to lay down their lives for some kind of a cause. Now, we don't see terrorists willing to blow themselves up as heroes.
No,
but
we don't.
But based on our value system, again, we come from a Christian worldview.
Right.
And if somebody's willing to lay down their life for a set of biblical values, we think of Martin Luther King Jr. and we think of Bonhoeffer in the Second World War who laid down his life. The guys on Flight 93 who gave up their life to save the people from flying into the Pentagon. I mean, these are modern, real-life heroes that are based on giving their lives away. I mean, being willing to go through annihilation for a cause that is just.
That's greater than themselves.
Is greater than themselves. And men are drawn to that.
Yeah. And generally, what they're drawn to is a subversion of that or a twisted form of that. I think about sports, for example, in which you win at all costs. I mean, it's not about laying your life for nobody, actually. You know, even within your team. I'm referring to I was watching the news today about a broadcast, team members sort of duking it out, and the commentator complaining about that's the example that our young men have today.
Well, and I think that's why the Super Bowl was so refreshing for a lot of Christians out there. Anyone out there who watched the Super Bowl saw a man in Tony Dungy who's surrounded by the icon of manhood, supposedly the icon of manhood.
Meaning football?
Football, the sport itself, shows how manly testosterone can be, that we dominate other men and show how tough we are.
Right.
But here's this man who's giving God all the glory with this serenity about him after the win. I even saw a picture, went around on the internet, of him kneeling down around the Super Bowl trophy in their locker room. When most teams would have been boozing it up and partying it up, this whole team was on their knees, giving, privately.
Yeah.
Giving God glory.
Stand out.
So there's this man in the middle of what supposedly shows manhood, showing what a real man really is, and I think people are just drawn to that quality of character.
Yeah, I think it stands out, especially in today. I mean, like I said, we've got the extremes that we see, and it's refreshing to see the reality of what a real man can be like. And that example, it really does shine through when you do see it, because we just don't see it as much as we used to.
Yeah, and I think that's what God's doing in our modern age, is he's taking these people in the middle of what supposedly shows what real men are like. And God shows the contrast in character, and it shines brightly, the difference.
One of the contrasts that stood out from you mentioned the fathers in the 50s. I remember watching the Cleavers coming home from work in suit, and the mother with the white skirt welcoming him, etc. And one of the articles that we were discussing, one of the secular articles, was commenting that today's man in general wants to be a family man. They want to stay home and change diapers and cook, however, which is a good thing, right? Wouldn't you identify with that?
That's the reality
rather than
of it.
the 50, right? Yeah, but her comment was really telling, is that they left behind the redeeming value of honesty and dependability and strength. So in other words, we have wimpy dads. Sorry, Rick, I know you're a young dad. You know you're not a wimpy
Yeah, not
man.
all dads are wimpy.
No, not all of them.
Yeah,
and there's millions of men listening who are doing...
I played baseball with my son last week. Just want everybody
there are
to know.
millions of men listening to us who are doing right and doing the best they can.
Right.
And that's the good news, is that in spite of the way the media and the way the marketers have gone out there to try and capture away and cast young men
into metrosexuals.
That
was so interesting.
Hey, it's great to be narcissistic as long as you buy our products.
Right.
Well, it's not just that. It's also the media portrays guys now as childish or immature, or you know, just,
and the woman has to be the one who's
the
taking
mother,
the leadership role
has to lead
in the home.
Right. Yeah, and not just that, but just in the relationship. Maybe it's not in a marriage. It's just in a
responsibility.
Normal, right. Yeah. I mean, you have these shows on TV that just highlight the fact that guys in their 20s and 30s, all they want to do is play video games, and don't want to have the responsibility, but want to have all the fun. And it's unfortunate because what it ends up portraying is that being a real man almost then becomes thrust upon you when the situation calls. It's one of those things where a man is a man all the time. What he does and how he does it and the decisions that he makes. And it seems like nowadays society says, well, you can be a kid as long as you want. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is that all of a sudden now you get put into a situation almost like, oh, I got to grow up. A job, a relationship, a serious relationship, fatherhood, a marriage. It all of a sudden it thrusts upon you, and then all of a sudden you're like,
you wake up and it's you.
You wake up, and all of a sudden it was 1989, and I was graduating from high school, and now I'm a dad.
You sound like you're talking about from personal experience.
Maybe just a little bit. Yeah.
And you were sharing a little bit about that.
Yeah. About the bottom line, actually, and I know you've got a frog story after the break, but the bottom line is every man knows he needs to take a bullet for his family. But how, in practical terms, do we do that? And Rick's going to share some personal experience when we come back.
Rick is going to share some personal experience on this, and more from our men. So you need to come back and hear this fascinating story on frogs and such.
Something like that.
Yeah. So please come back. Welcome back, everyone, to Hope on Fire, as we talk about what's a real man. And it is raining man at Hope on Fire today.
Oh, boy.
And it is full of testosterone and a lot of information. What are you looking up? We're talking about you guys.
I don't want to get hit.
Yeah. Anyway, we were in the midst of a story, of a frog story that we promised we'd get back to.
Yeah, well, we were
an epiphany.
Yeah, what we were talking about was the fact that it's almost like we're drug into manhood sometimes reluctantly. It seems like now, at least I felt like that. When I shouldn't say reluctantly, it was almost like it was thrust upon me, and I was just surprised by it all. I mean, I graduated from college. I got my job. I got the girl. We got married. I bought the house.
Checked it off your list.
I checked it off my list. Right. And one night I was sitting there watching TV with my wife, and all of a sudden I heard this thunk, 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 and I was like, what is that? And it stopped, and and my wife and I kind of looked at each other and watched TV, and all of a sudden I heard it again. And I'm like, what's going on? So anyway, long story short, it ended up being a frog in my heat pump outside my house, the air conditioner unit, essentially. And essentially this poor guy, this big frog, had gotten in there, and the blades had done its thing and had kicked it out once, and then that's what I heard. It stopped, and then it had slid back in. And all of a sudden I had to go back in the house, get a screwdriver, get the grate up, take the frog out. And all of a sudden I was halfway through this process. I'm like, this is what a dad is supposed to do. You know, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what some dad.
Felt a little out of body experience.
Yeah, I'm like, holy cow! I said, well, you are a dad. It just, all of a sudden, it just kind of hit me.
You,
yeah,
yes.
I mean, having a son being born. I mean, yeah, and the more responsibility and feeding, you know. But all of a sudden now, it's like I was doing something that I would attributed it to somebody in their 50s or 60s or some, you know, gray-haired guy. And it just all of a sudden it was just wait a minute, I'm a guy, I'm a man.
You're the protector, you know, against the big bad frog.
Exactly.
Well, he was taking a bullet for his family right there.
Right,
he's going out.
The proverbial frog bullet, I guess. But yeah, I mean, all of a sudden now it's like, wait a minute, I'm a dad, I'm a man, I'm a
provider.
And it's not just confusing maybe for men, and I appreciate that real story, because I have a feeling a lot of men who are listening are resonating with that. But it's not only confusing for the men, but for the women as well too. I think sometimes we contribute to this confusion as well too. We ask for a man to be very strong, but be really sensitive, be sweet, but don't be weak. And you know, and I think. And you had a great resource about that.
Well, I don't know that it's a great resource for Christian.
Or commentary, to that truth, right?
Well, it's definitely a sign of the times.
Right.
I mean, because we talked about how the media and the influence on our culture has sort of dumbed down the role of the man and made it even more confusing than ever. There's a book that came out recently called Down Boy. It's a tongue-in-cheek guide to breaking in a new boyfriend.
That can't be good.
And
Down
it uses it's a comprehensive manual that covers the finer points, and it uses dog training techniques. So, I mean, this is what our culture is coming to.
Yes.
And it's no wonder that both sexes are more confused than ever.
And I've heard women refer to comparing the training of a man to a dog. That cannot be helpful. And I think the appeal to women is sort of to know themselves.
Well, and I think that comes back to the issue of wanting a man to be the rock, but also be sensitive. And that's the emotional gymnastics that a man often goes through in the culture we live in, where the Bible casts the man as the leader of the family. And yet, with the freedom of women's lib and all of the liberation movement of women, because men have kind of disappeared.
And it has done some good, the liberation of women, quote unquote. I suppose they're allowed to vote now, and that's all in good. So, but this ambiguity of the male role has created that vacuum, so that anything that fits in seems
sometimes
to
you don't
define
know
it.
Right. Sometimes you don't know how to act. It's like, is this when I need to be strong and resolute and a rock, or is this when I need to be more comforting and emotional and cry? And you know, so all of a sudden now the model of what a guy needs to be or a man needs to be is different depending on the situation. Maybe it's depending on the person that he's with, and it's you know, it's not easy because we don't know how to act.
No, in my opinion, I think it has a lot to do with the fear of the male strength. I think we're afraid of the man as a leader. Immediately, some women have this image of being overpowered or something.
Well, it's
not the image that God has in mind.
Yeah, and you know, women just need to understand. I think men can resonate well and respond well to women when they understand how he likes to be treated. One of the things that's interesting is locker room code of conduct, for example, for men.
Locker room code of conduct.
There's a code of conduct the way men talk to one another. Believe it or not, it's true.
Wow.
Men don't sit around in a locker room and say, "Hey, you look great, fabulous in those jeans, buddy." You know, we don't give direct compliments. We give indirect compliments. Hey, nice swing, but dude, that was awesome. Right. It's always something indirect.
What you do. Almost,
it's what you do
based on what you're
and you know,
accomplishments.
And when a woman affirms a man in his work and tells him that he's providing, that he's effectively being that man in the house, he's encouraged to continue down a road. But so often, a woman doesn't know how to interact with the man. In fact, some resources said the spouse should sit beside the man when she's got something she needs to say to him, and not in front of him, because a man suddenly feels competitive when he's got someone in his face.
Good point.
So these are ways that women can learn to interact in a way that doesn't make a man feel like he needs to pull back. Because if a man feels cornered, he'll either fight or he'll isolate, especially if he feels like he can't. You know, the man's greatest fear is that I don't have what it takes. I don't have what it takes. And that's one of the ways that masculinity being passed on to a young man, the father says to the son, you have what it takes.
That you have it.
You got it, you know, and by God's grace, you're going to be a success in life. He hears that from the time he's young, and he's encouraged as he grows up. And so many young men don't have that today.
Well, Chris, and you guys are really providing to the discussion. I really appreciate it. Let's talk about the support that men receive and how they can receive it. It seems like with a seeming lack of role models that some men out there are seeking for that type of support,
I mean,
right?
We were talking about what it means to be a man, but we really need to put it in a spiritual light because, I mean, obviously that's the goal here. Is that, you know, there's the Jack Bauer 24 model, and then there's the biblical model that says, listen, you know, being a man is so much more. There's so many aspects to it, and I think you know that's what we're going to take a look at.
Definitely. Well, let's do that. Let's do that. Let's talk about that. Based on how the men are wired, and
well, let's take a look.
What the Bible has to say about that.
I mean, let's face it. Today, we're so much about image, and the man is viewed by what he does, by the assets he acquires, by the woman, how beautiful she is.
So no substance.
He's measured. Really. He's measured in those
external things.
Those external things, as opposed to the character. And you know, one of the best places we can go in the scriptures to see how God views the real man is to go to the life of David. Actually, before David is even anointed, we go and we see God coming to Samuel and said, you know what, I'm going to choose another king because Saul didn't have what it took inside here.
Even though he was the tallest and the most showy one, right?
Saul had all the physical tools of appearance, outward appearance in that nation.
Of a leader.
And they all wanted him because he was head and shoulders above everybody. Yeah. He had the look.
Right.
But you know, when he was called, he was hiding under a pile of hay. He was so nervous. But when God rejected Saul, he went. And what happened with Samuel? He said, "Go to Jesse's house, and when you go there, I'll show you who I've chosen." And Samuel, the prophet, didn't even know from looking at the outside appearance. He thought the oldest was the one because he looked great. He had all the physical tools.
Must be the one.
But you know, what did God say to him? He's not the one. Don't look at his external appearance because God looks at the heart.
Thank God for that. Praise God, he does.
Thank God for that.
Yeah.
You know, and so here we have the contrast of little, scrawny but good-looking, handsome David, who is one of the Hebrew terms is smallest.
Yes.
He may not have been a big guy compared to his brothers, but he had character.
Right.
And that's what God had chosen him for.
And this is what this program ultimately is a call to, for character. And how does one develop character? You talked about that once, about the law of exposure. Yeah, you know, being in that atmosphere.
Well, you know, David grew his character in anonymity. I mean, he was out in this desolate place, learning how to worship God, and so that when God brought him into the public setting, he just simply lived out his life the way he learned to worship God in private. He brought that into his public life. And so his private life and his public life were not duplicitous. And most men today, they struggle between their private lives and their public lives.
Two lives, yes.
The internet is a great temptation for men, as we know. And we had a program on sex and porn addiction.
Yes.
It's a big problem for men. The things the devil has done to bring in and try to make a man live duplicitous, we don't see that in David's life. And he did the little things. You know, you see how he killed the lion and the bear before he ever saw Goliath.
And what would you say, as people are listening, and we want to offer again a word of encouragement, what do you think is the greatest concern as men?
Well, I mean, I think for us, you know, someone like me who maybe didn't have the dad around, you know, is trying to figure out what kind of life do I want to lead?
How do you begin defining that?
Well, I don't know. I guess one of the things that you have to look at is obviously it has to get down to a spiritual aspect to it, because obviously, if you look at me, I'm not a big guy. I'm not going to win the man contest with big muscles. I have to have my friends help me carry my TV and when I move. But but what I get solace from is to realize when I look at David's life, I go, you know what? That's not the measure of a man. Is not what he looks like and how big he is.
Awesome.
It's completely different. I mean, there's a song that kind of I wish I had the lyrics in my head that kind of talk about it. But that gives me a little bit of hope to realize that who I am is not the way I look or how big I am or how much I win.
Yeah.
You know, the good news, Sabine, is that Christian men today that are watching should have more hope than any other man in the world. Because there is so much confusion out there, constantly changing fads. But you know what? God's word doesn't change.
Amen.
Malachi 3 says, "I am the Lord and I don't change." If we want to know what it means to be a man, we need to read the Word of God in Micah 6:8. It's a pretty simple formula. If men had a formula, we could stir it up and hopefully learn how to live it. It says, "He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To do justly, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God."
That sounds like a formula.
Three big things is a formula that God is looking for every man to live.
And Chris and Rick, I appreciate you guys' input, and I think guys listening to us are going to be really encouraged by what you had to say. And as you were talking and as we were preparing for the program, I couldn't help thinking about the story of Jacob from the Bible, and I encourage you to read his story in Genesis. And Jacob has some issue with integrity or lack of integrity. Yet Jacob, the deceiver, becomes Israel in the story, the prince of God. How he had everything, yet he said to God, I won't let you go until you bless me. What's a real man? You don't need all the answers, but to turn to the answer to all of life's questioning, and that's God. What's a real man? He's a man of character who strives with culture and with God. He's broken but triumphant because he desperately holds on to God and is desperate for God's presence himself. Men, we need you, your leadership, your strength, and most of all, your faith in God. Thank you for joining us at Hope on Fire. See you next time.
Hope on Fire is produced by Livestreams Media, a listener-supported ministry. To download a free copy of today's program or be a part of our social network, please visit our website at hopeonfire.org. You may also contact us by writing to Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860. Once again, that's Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860. Or online at hopeonfire.org. Thank you so much for your letters and continued support. Until next time, may God set your hope on fire.